If you think the happiest day of your life cannot become the beginning of your greatest regret, then you have never carried a wedding cake into a bakery where your past is quietly waiting for you. Roman Caldwell had negotiated billion-dollar shipping contracts, ended territorial disputes without raising his voice, and built a reputation as the calm alpha who never allowed emotion to influence business. Yet on the gray autumn morning, when he personally drove across Boston to collect his own wedding cake, he felt strangely restless. The marriage waiting for him that afternoon was not a celebration of love. It was an alliance between powerful families, approved by attorneys, financial advisors, and elders who believed stability mattered more than happiness. Roman accepted the arrangement because refusing would throw years of careful negotiations into chaos. He told himself that duty always came before personal desire. The elegant white cake waiting inside Blue Harbor Bakery represented another obligation to complete before the ceremony began. A light bell rang as Roman opened the bakery door. Warm scents of vanilla, cinnamon, and fresh bread replaced the cold harbor air outside. For a brief moment, the peaceful little shop felt completely disconnected from the complicated world he ruled. He noticed shelves filled with handmade pastries, colorful decorations prepared for neighborhood birthdays, and small drawings taped to the walls by local children. It reminded him of a life he had never allowed himself to imagine. A young employee smiled politely before disappearing into the kitchen to retrieve the completed cake. Roman adjusted the sleeve of his charcoal suit and glanced toward the display counter. Then time seemed to stop. Standing only a few feet away was Elliot Hayes. 6 years had passed since Roman last saw the Omega disappear without explanation. 6 years since every search ended with silence. 6 years since Roman convinced himself that Elliot had accepted money and walked away forever. Yet there he was, wearing a simple blue apron dusted with flour, carefully holding the hand of a small boy who looked no older than 5. Elliot looked up slowly. The color drained from his face as recognition appeared in his eyes. Neither of them spoke. The little boy tilted his head curiously before looking from Elliot to the unfamiliar alpha standing across the room. Roman could not explain why his heartbeat suddenly became uneven. Then the child lifted his face completely, and Roman saw the same silver-gray eyes carried by generations of the Caldwell family. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The shape of the boy's smile, the quiet confidence in his posture, even the subtle alpha scent beginning to develop despite his young age felt painfully familiar. The child stared at Roman with innocent curiosity while holding a small wooden toy ship. Roman's instincts responded before his thoughts could catch up. His alpha senses recognized a biological connection strong enough to silence every other scent inside the bakery. Elliot noticed the reaction immediately. Calm but visibly nervous, he pressed a small scent neutralizer attached beneath the counter. A gentle mist filled the room, softening the invisible bond before it attracted unwanted attention. He stepped protectively closer to the little boy without appearing frightened. Roman finally found his voice. "Who is he?" Elliot looked directly into Roman's eyes. His answer contained only 2 quiet words. "My son." Before Roman could ask another question, 3 men wearing dark-tailored coats entered the bakery. They carried themselves with the unmistakable discipline of Caldwell security, but Roman recognized something more troubling. They reported directly to Malcolm Caldwell, his uncle and chairman of the family council. The oldest guard approached respectfully. "Sir, the council has received an anonymous alert concerning an unregistered alpha heir. Elder Malcolm requests immediate verification." Roman's expression hardened. No ordinary citizen could have learned about the child's developing alpha scent so quickly. Someone had been watching Elliot long before today. The employee returned carrying the elegant wedding cake, carefully placing it on the front counter. White icing reflected beneath the warm bakery lights, while delicate sugar flowers decorated every layer. Roman looked from the perfect wedding cake to Elliot protecting the little boy beside him. Everything he believed his day would become disappeared in a single moment. "The ceremony is postponed," Roman said calmly. The security team exchanged surprised glances, but remained silent. Roman continued without raising his voice. "Until I understand why my former Omega has been hiding with a child who carries my family's eyes, nothing else matters. I am asking you to accept temporary protection until we understand who created this situation," Roman said evenly. Nothing will happen without your written consent or an independent legal agreement. Elliot immediately shook his head. You are not taking him anywhere. Roman slowly nodded. Then neither of you will be taken anywhere. We will remain here until independent attorneys prepare terms you consider acceptable. Elliot folded his arms around the little boy. Protection only exists if I choose it. Every condition goes into writing before we move one step. Roman studied the Omega he once loved. The frightened young man he remembered had become someone stronger, someone unwilling to surrender control over his own future or his child's safety. For the first time in 6 years, Roman realized the greatest decision of his life would not happen inside a cathedral. It had already begun inside a neighborhood bakery, beside an untouched wedding cake, while a little boy with silver-gray eyes quietly reached for Elliot's hand and unknowingly changed every future waiting ahead. Roman refused every demand from the family council before leaving Blue Harbor Bakery. Instead of allowing Malcolm's security team to escort Elliot and Jamie to Caldwell headquarters, he contacted an independent legal office specializing in Alpha and Omega family law. Within an hour, 3 attorneys arrived carrying emergency custody documents and temporary protection agreements. Elliot read every page slowly while Jamie sat beside him coloring a picture of a sailboat with bright blue crayons. Roman waited in complete silence, resisting the instinct to rush the process. 6 years earlier, he would have expected immediate obedience. Today he understood that every signature had to belong to Elliot alone. One condition after another was revised until both attorneys agreed the documents protected Elliot's parental authority during the investigation. Only then did Elliot quietly accept temporary protective housing under Roman's personal responsibility instead of Caldwell family authority. Roman immediately canceled every reservation connected to his wedding ceremony. News spread across Boston within minutes, but he ignored every call from reporters and relatives. The only destination that mattered was a private waterfront home legally owned by him before he inherited leadership of the Caldwell organization. The property had never been registered as family territory, making it the safest place available. When they arrived, Jamie stepped cautiously inside while holding Elliot's hand. The little boy quietly explored the living room, stopping to examine framed photographs of old sailing ships displayed along the walls. One picture showed Roman standing beside a restored cargo vessel several years earlier. Jamie studied it with obvious fascination before softly asking, "Did you really sail those?" Roman smiled for the first time that day. "Sometimes. Ships carried my family across oceans long before I was born." Jamie looked impressed but quickly returned to Elliot's side, still uncertain whether this unfamiliar alpha deserved his trust. Later that afternoon, Natalie Foster, an independent Omega rights attorney, arrived together with specialists from a federally certified biological testing laboratory. Malcolm had demanded that Jamie undergo immediate verification inside the Caldwell Medical Center, but Elliot firmly refused. Under federal Alpha and Omega family law, any parent could request an independent laboratory whenever inheritance or custody disputes existed. Roman supported Elliot without hesitation. Blood samples, scent markers, and genetic records were collected under strict legal supervision while every step was documented on video. Nobody spoke during the procedure except Jamie, who bravely asked whether the tiny needle meant he had done something wrong. Elliot knelt beside him and gently explained that grown-ups sometimes needed honest answers before they could make fair decisions. Jamie nodded seriously and squeezed Elliot's hand until the examination ended. The laboratory promised official results within several hours because emergency custody issues required immediate review. As evening settled over the harbor, Elliot quietly prepared dinner in the unfamiliar kitchen. Roman awkwardly offered to help despite admitting he had almost never cooked for anyone. Jamie watched with open curiosity as the intimidating alpha unsuccessfully attempted to slice vegetables into equal pieces. The sight was unexpectedly amusing. Jamie laughed, covering his mouth with both hands while Elliot struggled not to smile. For one peaceful moment, the heavy weight of legal battles disappeared beneath ordinary family conversation. Shortly before sunset, the laboratory director returned carrying a sealed envelope protected by federal certification. Everyone gathered around the dining table. Elliot took a deep breath before opening the report. His hands trembled slightly while reading the conclusion. Roman remained perfectly still, unwilling to invade the moment. Finally, Elliot slowly lowered the document onto the table. The report confirmed that Roman Caldwell was Jamie's biological father with a probability exceeding every legal standard required for parental recognition. Silence filled the room. Roman looked at Jamie with overwhelming emotion but made no attempt to touch him. Instead, he quietly lowered himself until he knelt at the child's eye level. "I will never force you to call me anything," Roman said gently. "You already have someone who has protected you every single day." Jamie studied him for several thoughtful seconds before cautiously extending one small hand. Roman accepted the gesture carefully, treating it as a gift rather than a right. Elliot watched the quiet moment before opening a worn envelope hidden inside his travel bag. He removed an old cashier's check bearing Roman's electronic signature and placed it beside the laboratory report. "6 years ago," Elliot whispered, "your uncle delivered this payment and told me you wanted me gone before our child could ever change your future." Roman stared at the signature in disbelief. It looked exactly like his own. The banking authorization was genuine, yet he had never seen the document before. At that moment, Roman realized the greatest mystery was no longer whether Jamie belonged to him. The real question was who had stolen 6 years from all 3 of their lives. Roman spent the entire night inside his private office studying financial records that had not been opened in years. Every electronic authorization connected to the cashier's check carried his verified digital signature. Yet the transaction occurred while immigration records, airline manifests, and security logs confirmed he had been attending an international shipping conference in Rotterdam. Someone had accessed his executive credentials from Boston while he stood thousands of miles away. By sunrise, Roman contacted an independent forensic accounting firm instead of relying on Caldwell family investigators. He no longer trusted any internal department connected to his uncle. The specialists quietly confirmed his growing suspicion. The payment had originated from his personal account, but the authorization sequence had been executed through a secondary administrative channel available only to members of the family council. One name repeatedly appeared within protected access logs: Malcolm Caldwell. Roman closed the report without speaking. For 6 years, he had blamed Elliot for abandoning him, never imagining someone inside his own family had carefully arranged every misunderstanding. Elliot watched Roman from across the kitchen table without celebrating the discovery. The truth answered one question while creating many others. He slowly removed another worn envelope from his travel bag and placed several faded medical documents beside the forged payment record. "There is more," he said quietly. Roman unfolded the papers and immediately recognized the official letterhead belonging to Dr. Preston Hale, the longtime physician serving the Caldwell organization. The first report declared that Elliot's pregnancy had ended unexpectedly. The second document, dated only 3 weeks later, advised Elliot to avoid emotional stress while continuing prenatal care because the pregnancy remained healthy. Roman looked up in disbelief. Elliot explained everything he had hidden for years. After Malcolm arrived with the cashier's check, Dr. Hale privately informed him that the baby had not survived. Grief overwhelmed him until severe abdominal pain forced another examination at an independent clinic outside the city. There, a different physician confirmed the child was alive and developing normally. When Elliot attempted to retrieve his original medical records, they had already disappeared from every registered database. Dr. Hale denied the second examination had ever existed. Elliot immediately understood someone wanted his unborn child erased before birth. Afraid that returning to Roman would place the baby directly inside the reach of the Caldwell family council, he fled Boston using borrowed identification provided by a retired Omega shelter director. He eventually settled in a quiet coastal neighborhood where nobody knew his past. Jamie was born healthy several months later, but Elliot never registered the child's alpha lineage because the National Scent Lineage Registry automatically notified extended alpha families whenever a potential heir entered the system. Remaining invisible became the only protection he believed his son possessed. Roman listened without interrupting. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. He realized Elliot had not hidden Jamie because he wanted revenge or independence. He had hidden him because every institution surrounding the Caldwell name rewarded secrecy more than honesty. Roman quietly apologized, but Elliot gently shook his head. "An apology cannot return 6 years," he answered. What matters now is whether you help protect the years we still have. Before Roman could respond, his secure telephone rang. Natalie Foster answered first, her expression immediately becoming serious. Federal registry officials had discovered that Jamie possessed no official alpha lineage record despite laboratory confirmation completed the previous day. Under the alpha heir doctrine recognized by several traditional family trusts, Malcolm had already submitted an emergency petition requesting temporary guardianship until the child's inheritance status could be reviewed. Elliot immediately understood the danger. If Jamie entered Caldwell custody before the investigation exposed Malcolm's actions, the family council could control every future decision affecting his education, residence, and succession rights. Roman stood without hesitation. "He will not face them alone," he said firmly. Elliot looked directly at him. "Standing beside us is not enough. You must be willing to stand against your own family." Roman answered with complete certainty. "If protecting my son and his father requires that choice, then I have already made it." Their conversation paused when soft footsteps echoed through the hallway. Jamie appeared wearing oversized pajamas decorated with tiny sailboats, rubbing sleep from his eyes, while carrying a small wooden ship beneath one arm. He looked from Elliot to Roman with innocent confusion before quietly asking whether the grown-ups were arguing again. Both men immediately softened their expressions. Roman knelt several feet away, careful not to invade the child's space. Jamie studied him thoughtfully before walking closer and placing the wooden ship into Roman's hands. "You can hold it," he said shyly, "but you have to give it back because it is my favorite." Roman accepted the little boat with extraordinary care, understanding that the greatest gift offered that morning was not the toy itself. It was the first fragile piece of trust given freely by the little boy whose future now depended on whether two fathers could finally uncover the truth together. Claire Whitaker arrived at the waterfront house shortly after sunrise, wearing a simple cream-colored coat instead of the formal designer clothing Roman remembered from countless business events. She carried no security detail, no family representatives, and no wedding planner. Natalie Foster carefully verified her identity before allowing her inside. Elliot remained cautious, quietly positioning himself beside Jamie, while Roman watched Claire with measured attention. The silence lasted several moments before Claire placed a thick leather folder onto the dining table. "I did not come to save my engagement," she said calmly. "I came because I finally understand that I was never supposed to become your wife. I was supposed to become Malcolm's final business contract." Roman slowly opened the folder and discovered confidential partnership agreements connecting the proposed marriage to the transfer of voting authority over several Atlantic shipping terminals. Hidden among the financial documents were succession clauses stating that if Roman entered the marriage without a legally registered alpha heir, temporary control over multiple family trusts would automatically pass to Malcolm during the transition period. If an heir later appeared, Malcolm would remain legal administrator until the child reached adulthood. Elliot immediately realized the terrifying implication. Jamie had never been the obstacle preventing the marriage. Jamie had always been the missing piece Malcolm intended to control after securing the alliance. Claire quietly admitted that her own family had also been manipulated. She believed she was protecting thousands of employees whose livelihoods depended upon stable trade agreements. Instead, she had unknowingly become part of Malcolm's strategy to consolidate power. Roman looked at Claire with genuine respect. "Why tell us now?" Claire answered honestly. "Because I discovered that my signature mattered less than a child who never had the chance to choose his own future." Later that afternoon, Roman scheduled a public press conference outside Caldwell shipping headquarters. Reporters crowded every available space, expecting him to announce a postponed wedding date or deny rumors surrounding Elliot and Jamie. Instead, Roman calmly stepped before the cameras and accepted full responsibility for canceling the ceremony. He explained that the planned marriage no longer reflected his personal values or the future he intended to build. He never mentioned Elliot's name, never exposed Jamie's identity, and never blamed Claire for the broken engagement. Claire stood beside him voluntarily, confirming that the decision had been mutual and that neither family would pursue legal action against the other. Within minutes, every major news organization reported that one of Boston's most influential alpha leaders had abandoned a politically advantageous marriage without offering a convenient public excuse. Predictably, Criticism arrived almost immediately. Commentators accused an unnamed Omega of manipulating Roman. Anonymous online accounts claimed a hidden child had been invented to seize inheritance rights. Malcolm quietly encouraged those rumors through carefully placed media contacts while presenting himself as the calm elder attempting to preserve family stability. Elliot watched the broadcast from the waterfront house with growing frustration. "I will not spend the rest of my life hiding because people refuse to hear the truth," he said quietly. Roman agreed, yet he refused to force Elliot into public attention before he felt ready. That evening, Claire returned one final time carrying a small white box. Inside rested the untouched wedding cake topper originally designed for the canceled ceremony. Two elegant figures stood side by side, symbolizing a marriage that would never happen. Claire smiled gently before handing the box to Elliot. "Perhaps one day someone will create a better ending than the one our families planned." After she left, Jamie wandered into the living room wearing his favorite blue sweater and asked whether the wedding cake still existed. Roman nodded and explained that it remained safely stored because no one wanted to waste something made with care. Jamie thought for a moment before suggesting that cakes should only be eaten when everyone smiled honestly. His innocent words filled the room with unexpected warmth. Later that night, after Jamie had fallen asleep, Roman and Elliot stepped onto the quiet harbor deck overlooking the dark Atlantic water. Cool sea air carried the distant sound of passing ships. Roman finally admitted that during the 6 years they had been apart, he searched every city where he believed Elliot might have started over, never realizing the people closest to him had been hiding the truth. Elliot listened without interrupting before answering softly. "Finding someone again does not erase the reason they had to disappear." Roman accepted those words without argument. Instead of reaching for Elliot, he simply stood beside him beneath the quiet night sky, understanding that trust could not be demanded, only earned one patient choice at a time. The following morning began with an official notice delivered by Federal Courier instead of the Caldwell Family Council. Roman opened the sealed envelope while Elliot prepared breakfast, and Jamie carefully arranged slices of fruit into the shape of a sailboat on his plate. The notice confirmed that the emergency guardianship petition filed by Malcolm had been accepted for preliminary review. A formal hearing would take place within 48 hours. Until then, Jamie could remain with Elliot under temporary protection, but every legal decision would now be examined by the court. Natalie Foster immediately gathered every document they had collected, including the independent laboratory report, the forged cashier's check, the conflicting medical records, and the forensic accounting analysis. She calmly explained that proving Malcolm had manipulated Roman would strengthen their position, but the court would ultimately focus on one question above everything else: which environment truly protected Jamie's future as both a child and a developing alpha. Elliot quietly nodded. He had spent 6 years preparing to protect his son alone. Now he had to prove that allowing Roman into Jamie's life would make that future stronger rather than more dangerous. Later that afternoon, Roman invited Jamie to visit a small maritime education center overlooking Boston Harbor. Elliot agreed on one condition. He would accompany them for the entire visit. The quiet museum displayed restored navigation instruments, model ships, and journals written by sailors more than a century earlier. Jamie moved from exhibit to exhibit with growing excitement, asking endless questions about maps, storms, and distant coastlines. Roman answered each one patiently, never pretending to know something he did not. When Jamie asked how captains avoided becoming lost at sea, Roman smiled gently before pointing toward an old brass compass displayed beneath protective glass. "A good captain is not someone who never loses direction," he explained. "A good captain is someone willing to admit it and find the correct course again." Elliot heard the answer and understood Roman was speaking about far more than ships. As they prepared to leave, an elderly volunteer approached them carrying an old visitor photograph. He recognized Roman from a charity event held almost 7 years earlier. Smiling warmly, the volunteer mentioned that Roman had once visited the center with a cheerful young Omega who spent nearly an hour teaching local children how to decorate miniature paper boats. Elliot stared at the faded photograph in surprise. It captured one forgotten afternoon before everything fell apart. They were laughing together without noticing the camera. Roman quietly accepted the picture and handed it to Elliot instead of keeping it himself. "It belongs to both of us," he said softly. That evening, Natalie returned with another breakthrough. The forensic accountants had recovered archived security footage from the financial institution where the forged cashier's check originated. Although the recording quality was limited, one detail stood out clearly. Malcolm had entered the restricted executive authorization office accompanied by Dr. Preston Hale on the exact afternoon Roman's digital credentials were used. The timestamp matched the conference schedule, proving Roman had been overseas. Even more important, an internal access record showed that Malcolm personally requested Roman's executive authentication token less than 1 hour before the unauthorized transaction occurred. Natalie believed the evidence established a consistent pattern connecting the forged payment, the altered medical records, and the disappearance of official pregnancy documentation. Elliot finally allowed himself to believe that the truth might actually reach a courtroom instead of remaining buried beneath family influence. As the evening grew quiet, Jamie carried his favorite storybook into the living room and climbed beside Elliot on the sofa. He looked toward Roman before asking an unexpected question. If you stay after the judge decides everything, can we build a real sailboat together someday? Roman looked at Elliot first instead of answering immediately. Elliot saw no pressure in Roman's expression, only patient hope. After a long moment, Elliot gave a small approving nod. Roman smiled warmly at Jamie. I would like that very much, but only if your father helps us choose the color. Jamie laughed happily before announcing that every good boat should be blue because blue meant people always found their way home. Neither Roman nor Elliot corrected him. For the first time since fate reunited them inside the bakery, home no longer felt like a place either of them had lost. It slowly began to feel like something they might still build together. 48 hours later, the federal courthouse overlooking Boston Harbor became the center of every conversation surrounding the Caldwell family. Journalists gathered outside the entrance, but Natalie Foster successfully obtained a protective order preventing Jamie from being photographed or identified during the proceedings. Roman arrived beside Elliot rather than ahead of him, making it unmistakably clear that they would enter the courtroom together instead of as opposing parties. Jamie remained in a private family waiting room supervised by a licensed child advocate whose only responsibility was protecting his emotional well-being throughout the hearing. Before the session began, the advocate asked Jamie whether he felt safe with the people who cared for him. Jamie smiled quietly and answered that he had one father who had always protected him and another father who was learning how to do the same. Those simple words were carefully recorded as part of the confidential family assessment. Inside the courtroom, Malcolm Caldwell appeared calm and impeccably dressed, presenting himself as an experienced elder motivated only by concern for the future of the Caldwell legacy. His attorneys argued that Jamie's sudden appearance created uncertainty surrounding inheritance, governance, and long-term succession planning. They claimed temporary counsel supervision would provide stability until every financial matter could be resolved. Natalie responded immediately by reminding the court that the hearing concerned a child's welfare rather than corporate governance. She then introduced the independent laboratory report confirming Roman's biological relationship with Jamie, followed by the temporary protection agreement voluntarily signed by Roman recognizing Elliot's uninterrupted role as Jamie's primary parent. The judge listened carefully before requesting evidence supporting the allegation that Malcolm had manipulated events leading to Elliot's disappearance. Natalie presented the recovered banking authorization records, the forensic accounting report, the archived security footage showing Malcolm and Dr. Preston Hale entering the restricted authorization office, and the conflicting medical documentation concerning Elliot's pregnancy. An independent digital security specialist testified that Roman's executive credentials had been accessed from Boston, while international travel records proved Roman remained overseas. The sequence established that someone with privileged internal authority had intentionally created the fraudulent financial transaction. Dr. Preston Hale appeared under subpoena and initially defended every decision recorded in the medical files. However, when confronted with archived backup data recovered from an off-site hospital server, he admitted that a revised medical report had been entered after direct communication with Malcolm's administrative office. Although he insisted he believed he was protecting family stability rather than harming anyone, the admission fundamentally changed the direction of the hearing. Malcolm remained silent as the courtroom absorbed the testimony. The judge requested a brief recess before returning with additional questions focused entirely upon Jamie. Roman stood and addressed the court without prepared notes. He acknowledged that he had failed Elliot because he accepted false information instead of searching for independent truth. He accepted responsibility for every year his son spent growing up without knowing him. He then stated clearly that no inheritance, business position, or family title deserved greater protection than Jamie's right to grow within a loving and honest home. Elliot spoke. Next, he explained that he never intended to separate Jamie from his biological father forever. His only goal had been protecting an unborn child from powerful people willing to erase inconvenient truths. He added that Roman's actions during the previous several days demonstrated patience, accountability, and genuine respect for both him and Jamie. He no longer feared Roman. He feared the system that had nearly destroyed them. The judge thanked both men before issuing an interim ruling. Malcolm's request for emergency guardianship was denied in its entirety. Temporary legal custody would remain with Elliot, while Roman immediately received recognized parental rights under a structured reunification plan developed in cooperation with licensed family counselors. Furthermore, the court ordered a formal investigation into possible fraud, document alteration, and abuse of institutional authority connected to the evidence presented during the hearing. As everyone prepared to leave, Jamie was quietly escorted into the courtroom after the public gallery had emptied. The judge smiled warmly and handed him a small wooden compass kept for children participating in family proceedings. Every family loses direction sometimes, the judge said gently. The important part is finding the courage to travel toward one another again. Jamie carefully accepted the little compass before looking toward Roman and Elliot. Without saying a single word, he reached out and took one of each father's hands. Neither man tried to lead him. Instead, the three of them walked out of the courthouse together at exactly the same pace, leaving the future finally open to choices built upon truth instead of fear. Several weeks passed after the courthouse decision, and for the first time in years the waterfront house no longer felt like a temporary refuge. It slowly became a place shaped by ordinary routines instead of emergency plans. Every morning Elliot prepared breakfast while Jamie insisted on setting the table himself, carefully placing 3 cups in exactly the same positions. Roman adjusted his business schedule so he could join them before leaving for the office, even if only for 30 quiet minutes. Those simple moments became more valuable than any corporate meeting he attended. Jamie no longer hesitated before asking Roman questions about ships, stars, or the strange collection of antique compasses displayed throughout the house. Roman answered each one with patience, understanding that trust was growing through consistency rather than grand promises. Meanwhile, the official investigation into Malcolm's conduct continued to expand. Federal investigators interviewed former Caldwell employees, financial administrators, and medical personnel connected to Dr. Preston Hale. Additional evidence revealed that confidential Alpha and Omega family records had been altered repeatedly over several years whenever succession disputes threatened Malcolm's influence. Several witnesses voluntarily testified after learning that independent legal protection had been granted by the court. Roman cooperated fully, providing unrestricted access to every corporate archive under his authority. He announced sweeping governance reforms inside Caldwell Shipping, removing hereditary privileges from executive oversight committees and replacing them with independent compliance officers. Some longtime family members strongly opposed the changes, arguing that Roman was weakening tradition. Roman calmly replied that traditions built upon deception deserved to end rather than survive. Elliot watched these decisions carefully. He appreciated Roman's actions, but remained honest about his own emotions. One quiet evening, after Jamie had fallen asleep with a storybook resting across his chest, Elliot admitted that forgiveness did not arrive as quickly as legal victories. "Some mornings I still wake up believing I have to run," he confessed while standing beside the harbor. Roman did not argue or defend himself. "Then I will keep proving that you do not have to," he answered softly. Elliot looked toward the calm water before giving the smallest smile Roman had seen since they reunited. It was not complete forgiveness. It was something even more meaningful. It was hope. A few days later, Jamie's elementary school organized a family discovery day, inviting parents to participate in classroom activities. Elliot planned to attend alone until Jamie quietly asked whether Roman could come too. The request surprised them both. On the morning of the event, Roman appeared wearing casual clothes instead of a business suit, carrying a small wooden model sailboat they had nearly finished building together. Inside the classroom, the children eagerly introduced their families. When Jamie proudly explained that he had two fathers who both helped him learn different things, the teacher simply smiled and thanked everyone for sharing. There were no uncomfortable questions, only genuine curiosity and kindness. Roman spent the afternoon teaching several children how wind moved a sailboat across water using paper fans and small cloth sails. Elliot watched from the back of the classroom, realizing that Roman was no longer trying to impress anyone. He was simply becoming the father Jamie deserved. As they prepared to leave, Jamie received a classroom award for teamwork because he insisted every child help decorate the large paper harbor displayed across one wall. He immediately handed the certificate to both fathers at the same time. "It belongs to all of us," he said happily. That evening they returned home, carrying the unfinished wooden sailboat. Instead of placing it back inside the workshop, Jamie asked whether they could paint it together immediately. The three of them spread newspapers across the dining table before opening cans of bright blue paint. Roman accidentally brushed a small streak across his own sleeve, causing Jamie to laugh so hard that Elliot could not help laughing as well. The room filled with genuine happiness instead of careful politeness. When the little boat finally dried, Jamie carefully wrote one word across its side in neat block letters. "Home." Roman and Elliot exchanged a quiet glance filled with understanding. Neither of them had expected the journey back to one another to begin inside a neighborhood bakery beside an untouched wedding cake. Yet standing together around a table covered with blue paint, watching a little boy proudly admire the boat they built as a family, both men finally understood that the strongest foundations were never created by perfect plans. They were created by choosing one another again and again until trust became stronger than every lie that once tried to keep them apart. Autumn gradually gave way to winter, and the investigation that once threatened to divide Roman, Elliot, and Jamie now began revealing changes far beyond the Caldwell family itself. Federal authorities formally concluded that multiple financial authorizations, medical records, and succession documents had been manipulated through coordinated abuse of administrative authority. Criminal proceedings moved forward independently, while several civil agencies introduced recommendations requiring stronger protections for Alpha and Omega families involved in inheritance disputes. News organizations no longer described the story as a corporate scandal alone. Many now discussed how legal systems could better protect parents and children from institutional pressure regardless of family influence. Roman welcomed every reform, even when they reduced the privileges once attached to his own position. He publicly announced a scholarship fund supporting Omega parents pursuing professional careers after unexpected family crises, explaining that opportunity should never depend upon powerful surnames. Elliot attended the announcement quietly from the audience instead of standing beside the stage. He preferred actions over symbolic appearances, yet seeing Roman willingly surrender old advantages confirmed that the changes were genuine rather than temporary. Life inside the waterfront home continued becoming increasingly ordinary. Jamie had started asking whether they could officially register the little blue sailboat they built together for the neighborhood Children's Harbor Festival held each spring. The event allowed families to display handmade model boats representing hopes for the future. Jamie insisted that their boat deserved a proper crew. He carefully painted 3 tiny figures inside the vessel, smiling proudly after giving each one different colored scarves. Roman laughed softly when Jamie explained that every captain needed people who reminded him where home could always be found. Elliot watched, father and son together from the workshop doorway, realizing that the distance separating them months earlier had almost completely disappeared. Later that week, Natalie Foster visited with unexpected news. Because the court investigation had uncovered serious misconduct affecting multiple families, judges requested public testimony from individuals willing to explain how the existing legal process failed ordinary Alpha and Omega parents. Natalie asked whether Elliot would consider speaking during the upcoming legislative review. Elliot hesitated at first. For years he survived by remaining invisible. standing before lawmakers and reporters felt completely opposite to every instinct that had protected him. That evening he discussed the invitation with Roman while Jamie slept upstairs. Roman never encouraged him or discouraged him. Instead, he simply asked one question. If another Omega faces the same fear you once carried, what would you hope someone had done before you? Elliot remained silent for several moments before quietly answering. I would hope they made it easier for the next family. 1 month later, Elliot appeared before the legislative committee. He never described himself as a victim. Instead, he spoke about practical protections that could have prevented years of unnecessary separation, including independent medical review, transparent parental notification procedures, stronger oversight of family councils, and confidential legal assistance for vulnerable Omega parents. His testimony remained calm, respectful, and deeply personal without accusing individuals beyond the evidence already established by the courts. Several lawmakers thanked him afterward, acknowledging that real reform often began when ordinary families chose honesty instead of silence. When Elliot returned home that evening, Jamie ran toward him holding the completed blue sailboat. Did you help people today? He asked with complete sincerity. Elliot smiled warmly and knelt beside him. I think I tried. Jamie nodded with quiet satisfaction before placing the little boat into Elliot's hands. Then it should sail first because helping people is brave. On the morning of the harbor festival, dozens of families gathered along the waterfront carrying colorful handmade boats. Children laughed while gentle winter sunlight reflected across the calm water. Jamie carefully lowered their blue sailboat into the shallow ceremonial pool prepared for the event. Roman stood on one side of him while Elliot stood on the other. A light breeze caught the tiny white sail, sending the little boat gliding steadily across the water toward the opposite shore. Jamie clapped happily before reaching for both fathers at exactly the same moment. Neither Roman nor Elliot hesitated. Their hands met naturally through Jamie's small fingers as they watched the boat continue forward without drifting off course. Elliot quietly looked toward Roman, and this time he did not step away. Instead, he offered the gentle smile Roman had waited years to see, not because every painful memory had disappeared, but because together they had finally built something stronger than the past. The little blue sailboat kept moving across the quiet harbor, carrying 3 small painted figures toward open water, just as the family standing beside it finally moved toward a future they had chosen together. 1 year later, the harbor looked almost exactly the same as it had on the morning Roman first walked into Blue Harbor Bakery, carrying expectations that never became reality. The difference was not the city, the water, or the changing seasons. The difference was the family standing together along the shoreline without fear. The legal investigations had officially concluded months earlier. Malcolm Caldwell was permanently removed from every leadership position connected to the Caldwell Family Council, and the shipping corporation, after multiple courts confirmed extensive administrative misconduct, financial fraud, and deliberate interference with protected family records. Dr. Preston Hale permanently surrendered his professional license after accepting responsibility for altering confidential medical documentation. Their cases became widely studied examples of why independent oversight had become essential within Alpha and Omega legal systems. Roman never celebrated those outcomes publicly. He believed justice should restore trust rather than satisfy revenge. Instead, he focused every day on building a future that no longer depended upon secrecy. Caldwell Shipping adopted transparent succession policies, independent ethics reviews, and equal parental protections regardless of Alpha or Omega status. Several major corporations voluntarily introduced similar reforms after witnessing how easily concentrated authority could be abused without accountability. Elliot quietly returned to Blue Harbor Bakery after receiving an offer to become its managing partner rather than simply an employee. The neighborhood customers who once knew him only as the kind Omega behind the pastry counter now admired the confidence with which he expanded the business. He introduced apprenticeship programs for young people beginning careers in baking, including scholarships funded through Roman's charitable foundation. Their professional lives remained separate by choice, yet every important decision continued to be discussed together around the dining table each evening. Jamie grew into a cheerful, thoughtful child whose curiosity seemed limitless. He loved school, sailing, and building increasingly complicated wooden boats with Roman every weekend. Elliot often laughed while watching sawdust cover the workshop floor because no project ever remained as small as either of them originally planned. One quiet Saturday afternoon, Jamie disappeared upstairs before returning with a carefully folded drawing he had been hiding for weeks. He placed it between Roman and Elliot without saying a word. The colorful picture showed three people standing beside the ocean holding hands while a bright blue sailboat floated across calm water beneath a clear sky. Above the drawing, Jamie had written in careful block letters, "Families do not become real because they are perfect. Families become real because they stay." Elliot read the sentence twice before smiling through quiet emotion. Roman gently placed the drawing inside a protective frame instead of storing it away. "This belongs where everyone can see it," he said softly. Several weeks later, the waterfront community organized another spring celebration. Blue Harbor Bakery provided desserts, while Caldwell Shipping sponsored maritime education for local children. Neighbors who had followed the family's difficult journey greeted them not as public figures, but simply as familiar faces. Claire Whitaker attended with her own nonprofit organization supporting young entrepreneurs. She warmly congratulated Elliot on the bakery's success and thanked Roman for honoring every promise he made after canceling their engagement. Time had transformed painful memories into mutual respect rather than resentment. As the afternoon sun slowly lowered across Boston Harbor, Jamie asked whether they could launch the blue sailboat once again. Roman and Elliot agreed immediately. Together they walked toward the same ceremonial pool where the little boat first sailed months earlier. Jamie carefully placed it on the water before stepping back. A gentle breeze carried the tiny vessel smoothly across the surface exactly as it had before. This time, however, there was no courtroom waiting ahead, no investigation, no hidden documents, and no unanswered questions. Only open water reflecting the golden evening light. Jamie reached upward, taking Elliot's hand with one hand and Roman's with the other. "We made it home," he whispered with complete certainty. Roman looked toward Elliot, silently asking a question he no longer wished to postpone. Elliot answered without needing words. He stepped closer until their shoulders touched naturally, then rested his head briefly against Roman's as the harbor breeze moved gently around them. Nothing dramatic happened. No audience applauded. No cameras interrupted the quiet moment. It was simply the peaceful ending both of them had spent years believing was impossible. Together they watched the little blue sailboat continue across the calm water while Jamie smiled between them. The wedding cake Roman once collected had never been served, yet the life created afterward became far sweeter than the future anyone else had planned for them. And as the evening light settled across the harbor, the three of them walked home side by side, knowing that the strongest promises were never written inside contracts or protected by powerful families. They were kept through ordinary days, honest choices, patient forgiveness, and the quiet decision to keep choosing one another for every tomorrow still waiting ahead. If you were in their place, what choice would you have made? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy Alpha and Omega stories filled with love, sacrifice, heartbreak, and unforgettable second chances, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey.